Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us in spite of this very frigid weather. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Faith Hillis, and I'm the director of the Center for East European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies here at the University of Chicago. And we are very honored today to host a group of European parliamentarians for a discussion of Ukraine's future in Europe. They are part of the United for Ukraine network, which unites 350 current and former members of parliaments and state officials from over 30 countries that are actively working to support Ukraine at the home countries and internationally. Several of our parliamentarians will speak today, and then I will be joined in conversation with my colleague Davia Tsibaruk, who is an assistant professor in our Slavic department and a proud Ukrainian, for a short discussion. And then at the end of the program, we will open the floor to a Q&A from the audience and from the many people joining us on Zoom. We actually have many more people sitting at home in their warm apartments watching us than we have in person here for good reason. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to the Consulate General of the Republic of Lithuania for its help in organizing this event. The Consul General Regimantas Jablonskas and Deputy Consul General Aista Yashka. I would also like to recognize the Consul General of Poland, Regina Jurovska, is in the audience, as well as the Consul General of Ukraine. Thank you for joining us, and I believe the Consul Generals of Germany and the Czech Republic may also be joining a little bit later. So I will begin by introducing the chair of the United for Ukraine Global Alliance, Žygimantas Pavilionis, who will introduce his colleagues. Mr. Pavilionis is the International Secretary of the Homeland Union Lithuanian Christian Democrats and the Deputy Chair of Foreign Affairs at the Lithuanian Parliament. Turn it over to you.
General Consul from Moldova. So, shall I introduce my friends?
Please.
So, to the right is the shining star of Lithuanian social democracy, born in independent Lithuania, Ruslanas Baranovas. To the left is the mother of Ukrainian integration to the West. She was deputy prime minister. She started the whole process under President Poroshenko. Is now in a position like me. But we fight actually for her. We're just supporting stuff. Sorry, Ivana, I'm tired. Then Bjorn from Sweden. He's a founder of most right-wing, very strong party called Swedish Democrats. And he's one of those Swedes who speak the truth, not so political correct like many Swedes, he's more like a Lithuanian type. And then Johannes, he's one of the most experienced 8 terms in parliament, now chair of Finnish Foreign Affairs Committee. And Finns are the strongest, well, maybe just Ukrainians can compete with them. They have 1 million army out of 4 million, and they defeated Russia, so they are our inspiration. So this is the introduction.
But how do
we proceed?
Yeah.
Shall we say something?
Mm-hmm. Please.
Okay, just to make it blunt and to provoke you a bit and maybe ask Ivana to continue. I was 19 years old. I was a student of philosophy. We are 2 philosophers here. And I was just reading nice romantic books and Lithuania declared independence. Russians sent tanks to crush it. It was wonderful, courageous, beloved by the West President Gorbachev, who sent tanks to kill us. My father was a rector of Vilnius University. He allowed all the students to come to those buildings. I was standing in TV Tower. I saw my friends killed by tanks. And then we gathered around the parliament. And then I heard first president of Lithuania speaking that, we have to do something. And I had an idea. Well, I will never kill like those Russians who killed my friends. I will better educate myself like a diplomat and try to integrate my country to UN NATO. And I did it. Because my father was a rector. He created the Institute of International Relations and Political Sciences for me. As a class. It was easy. And I was first class of Lithuanian diplomacy created by Vilnius University, and we did it. I'm just telling it to inspire and show that this is doable by even by soft measures, by integrating your country. We were the laggards of the Baltics and of other candidates to EU. Our economy was like close to, okay, I will not compare to any countries, but it was very bad. But with the EU, and I was coordinating accession talks in Brussels. I spent like 16 years of doing it, like Ivana. We created miracle. Now our economy is very close to United Kingdom. In purchasing power, per capita is 57,000. Brits, they have 66,000. And it just maybe another or 2 years, and those Lithuanian and Polish plumbers will be richer than Brits. So you can do it with European integration. And our enemy or neighbor, Belarus, still under all post-Soviet whatever rules, they were a much bigger economy than ours. They have 3 times bigger territory. They have 3 times more people. They are 10 million. We are 3. But the economy today is 3 times smaller than ours. That's why that is the cost of staying with those stupid Eastern autocracies. And that's what you can do with your economy. And here I close. Ukrainians who've been always having, the best economy, very well-educated people. If they have a chance finally to join EU and NATO, the chance that was taken from them, the Western leaders never wanted that. Your President Bush, the father, made a shameful speech in '91. They wanted to declare independence, and he said, this is nationalism, stay with Russians. By the way, the same Bush the father was saying to us, don't declare independence, stay with Gorbachev, he's so wonderful, he's so great. If we would listen to that, we would become Donbass today. So finally, only after 22nd, when they were invaded fully, the West opened the doors, EU, but NATO is still closed. And you know who keeps it closed? Americans, Washington, D.C. Today, all Europeans agree, well, except Hungarians, but this is not the standard, this is a Russian standard. So we agree they have to be, they have the strongest army. We have to join them, not they have to join NATO. Washington, D.C. today denies that right. And I call it Russian veto on the membership. And why should Russians have a veto on our sovereign will to have them as our family? Because I need them to survive. If they are defeated, we are next 100%. That was strange introduction to you.
And we're talking about European future.
Yes, Europe and okay.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a privilege that Ukrainians today are trying to advocate for their cause, for our cause, but we are not doing it alone. And this is incredible, being here, together with friends, and colleagues, and partners, allies from Finland, Sweden, from Lithuania. We were in DC together also with Spaniards, with Poles, with Germans. So, I mean, it's incredible. We couldn't have imagined that those years ago when we regained our independence. And yes, we did it irrespectively of what Bush Sr. Has been thinking. And he preached to the Ukrainian parliament that we should not even dare to think about independence. But we did it. And since then, with lots of unfortunately bumps, we've been trying to define our future as a European sovereign democratic nation. Unfortunately, we had some setbacks. Unfortunately, we had some presidents who have been redirecting the whole course of the country to another direction, back to the USSR, back to the Russian Empire, basically Russian Federation. But always Ukrainians have been standing up to the challenge, and this society has been clearing the course. it's surprisingly, we have like 35 years of independence, we have had 3 revolutions over this period of time. One was still before basically the Soviet Union was dissolved. Another one was in 2004 when we saw our elections, really the result of our elections that was stolen. We went out to the streets and by non-conventional, very creative ways, we basically found the way how to conduct the 3rd round of elections in order to prove that President Yushchenko was actually elected and not Yanukovych. Unfortunately, we had a setback after that. And we had the Revolution of Dignity back in 2014. I just realized yesterday that I was part of all the 3 revolutions, and I'd like to stop being a revolutionary. I'd like to exclusively focus on creating, on building, on not having the necessity to fight. But unfortunately, since 2014, when we had the Revolution of Dignity, when it did prevail the will of people to actually retain our sovereign choice of being part of the European, wider community. At that point, it was about association agreement that President Yanukovych that then fled to the Russian Federation. He refused to sign actually in Vilnius during the council.
Well, the revolution starts.
Yeah, yes, something to do with it. So at that point, when there was no clarity of the chain of command, there was no clarity, when the parliament had to take over the presidential powers and so on. At that point, Russians thought, well, this is the very good moment of weakness of Ukraine to attack, and that's when they started the attack on the on Crimea, by annexing Crimea, by creating a turmoil in the eastern part of Ukraine, presenting it to the world as if that is some kind of a civil war. And we really had to fight that Russian narrative. We really had to work hard to explain to our friends in Europe, actually, like I was there, I don't know so many times, to explain that this has nothing to do with civil war. It has to do with Russian invasion, but they were coming without insignia. They were working, not directly, and you could see them marching in as they marched in 2022. And since then, on the backdrop of the war, and I want to underline that the war is ongoing for 12 years already. 12 years. It's not 4 years of full, 4 years of full scale invasion. But people have been dying, people have been displaced, people have been wounded, have been losing their homes. We had to rebuild the army from ashes to withhold the Russian aggression since 2014. But since 2014, we have chosen our, very clearly have chosen our path to Europe. We started implementing the Europe Association Agreement of Ukraine. We have been very proud to fulfill 144 specific recommendations of the EU in order to gain access to free travel, having the visa-free regime with the European Union, and we set ourselves on the path of European and Euro-Atlantic integration. And in early 2019, we have also included provisions in our constitution that the strategic goals of Ukraine are to become EU and NATO members. And we have been, I was working with that team, and that's in the government at that point, and we've been criticized at that point a lot internally, because many have been seeing this as a populistic attempt to preserve the course. But then it has proven to be a very right decision. I think that at this point we can say that safely. And only since 2022, but I think it's an incredible thing that the European nations, in response to this full-scale Russian aggression, have decided to think not only economically, not only bureaucratically, not only technically, but also geopolitically. And that was the moment when, with this attack of Russia on Ukraine, the EU has opened up to Ukraine, to Moldova, to Georgia for that matter, with providing us with the candidate status, which allowed us to intensify the reforms even on the backdrop of this bloody war. So we are dying every single day. We are bleeding like I think it's incomprehensible what is going on as a backdrop of the war. But at the same time, we are trying to become stronger and more open and more democratic and more clear to our partners with regard to our procedures, with regard to our laws, with regard to our compatibility with European Union countries. And we believe that both EU and NATO membership are not only the anchors for Ukrainian nation that has been fighting so fiercely for its choice to be free, for its choice to be democratic, for its choice to be the sovereign nation capable of transforming. But it's also a very serious added value that will be brought to both unions, both the European Union and the alliance, if Ukraine will be part of those alliances, because we are not the beggars. And any assistance that is being rendered to Ukraine right now, it's not a charity. It is the investment. It is the investment into common future, common strength, into common capacity, both economically, militarily, security-wise, and geopolitically, for the future role of the European continent. So we are hoping that we will be able to move on successfully, but that requires a lot of work. And that requires a lot of work internally in terms of transformation. Not easy, but we do have, I just realized that I'm here sitting with this with one of my notebooks, which just says Ukraine to EU. And that's a big, huge project that is right now carried out by the Lithuanian Development Agency, but where we have Swedes who have chipped in with particular the European Commission, Sweden, Denmark. Right now, the other nations are also considering. It's the biggest ever huge project that is supporting reform agenda in Ukrainian ministries and the Ukrainian parliament to become successful on our European integration path. And so we are doing it right now with, again, not without hurdles, not without hiccups, unfortunately, but we believe that with this investment from our partners, we will be able to make the EU and NATO, for that matter, much stronger.
You want others to contribute?
Yes, we'd like to hear from anyone who has anything to say, and then we'll join you for a
The
conversation.
young generation, the future.
So thank you, first of all, to everyone who came in this way. I don't know that we were speaking in this trip, also with the mayor of your great city. I know you today have this Arctic, the so-called Arctic something, or it's like three last weeks in here. It's very similar weather like we have today, and most of houses don't have heating, electricity, and water. So you can only like imagine, what's going on there and how people are still finding ways to survive it with their food. But we are here in university, not in the city, but not with politicians, so we can be more technical and probably more serious on some things. So Ukraine EU, it will take, of course, also work on the EU side. Not only Ukraine's, and there are some really stupid decisions taken in Europe. So, for example, I always say if the rules were for us joining the EU, famous they are now for Ukraine, I don't think they would be EU members. There is 150 times, Hungary in this case, but any country, 150 times you can block the process.
Any country,
Any country.
any.
Yeah, so, you cannot buy Hungary 150 times. So basically, what to keep an eye on, there will be election this year in Hungary. They will be pivotal in any case. If the current government stays and they are blocking it, then there will be active decisions. There are more nuclear decisions, there are less nuclear decisions, but there will have to be decisions taken on changing the rules. And if another government wins and comes in, I think we still need to change the rules, but it will not be maybe such a burning question. There is also a lot of talk about EU reforms, which are needed for Ukraine to join. Most of these talks are bullshit. I was in Brussels, I think in this spring, and the European Parliament members were preparing this document, about the needed reforms so Ukraine can join or other countries can join. And when you look at the footnotes, most things they're sharing to older documents are from 2014, 2012, and we were not discussing any enlargement. So a lot of it is just, Brussels inner fight between Parliament and Commission, who is more important, what can they do, and this sort of debates, and they have this with you, right? There will have to be, few things we will need to change, I think. Also on our security and defense policy, probably giving up at least some level of, we will have to give up veto rights on some things, to be more operational. But in the end, we were speaking today with one journalist, and what's it's all about. It's not even, I think, about it's about economy, of course. It's about the way of life. It's about all these things. And we were also with Žygis in Moldova on their elections. And in our part of the world, it's always a struggle. It's always a fight every day. So, for example, in Moldova, Russians threw money for disinformation and just buying voters and all these activities almost the same as Moldovan budget. They spent the amount of money on disinformation campaigns. Still, Moldova chose pro-European parties. They won even more than it was expected. And why it happened? Why it's happening? Here you used to say that you are shining city on the hill, but now probably EU has become, for many nations, this shining city on the hill, and people want to join. So I think we will do all this work, and I think we will have, even probably before Ukraine, we will have, I would guess, even maybe faster, but this is also interesting debate. Some Balkan countries were moving faster because nobody is blocking them, not because they are doing more work or something like that, because no Hungary is blocking them. So yeah, but I will just stop here because I think it's more interesting to hear what you want to ask or what you want to say.
Newcomers to NATO and, well, of course, not newcomers in EU.
Thank you for having us here. For us in Sweden, the support to Ukraine is very, very important. Therefore, I'm very proud that we in the Swedish Parliament we have a unanimous support among all 8 parties to continue our support to Ukraine, and also a huge support from the citizens. So there is really no political debate on if we should continue or not with the support. We also have a long history together with Ukraine. In the 18th century, we fought together against the Russian Empire, and Ukrainians helped the Swedish army. And now it's time for Sweden also to pay back that debt to Ukraine. I think And Sweden is one of the biggest donors to Ukraine per capita since the full scale invasion. We have spent approximately $12 billion, which is quite a large amount for a small country as Sweden. Because we know that today the front line might be in Ukraine, but sooner or later, if Ukraine loses the war, the front line will be in Sweden. It's just a matter of time. And I think I know that Americans are more or less tired of sending troops abroad, more or less tired of engaging in war abroad. But I think it's very crucial that Americans, even if the distance to the military front line is far away from the United States, I think it's important to realize that Ukraine is not only fighting for Ukraine itself or Europe, but they are fighting for the whole free world. And it will have impact in the United States if Russia is weak. So this war is a little bit different from others. We should also be aware of that Russia is not an enemy among others. They have special muscles. They also have coordinated cooperation with other authoritarian and dictatorships like China, North Korea, Iran, and also in your hemisphere, Venezuela, Cuba, and such. So they're well coordinated and they have much more muscles. So therefore, it should be in American interest as well to continue support for Ukraine. And also, even if we in Europe, we have stepped up. I mean, okay, if we were really, really terrible in security and defense before, because we always rely on that America would come and save us. And I understand that Americans are also fed up with that to pay money for European security. And I think it was good that we last Trump administration, it was a wake-up call for the European leaders when Trump he threatened to withdraw troops from Europeans from Europe. That was a wake-up call, and since that we have stepped up. So now every country, more or less, are spending very much money on defense. But we can't help Ukraine by ourselves, actually. Even if we in the coalition are willing, we are ready to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. We need the American support. We need the United States to be there because in relation with Russia, United States is so much more powerful. So with America's help, together with us European, we can defeat Russia. And Russia must be defeated, otherwise they will be back. And they're already here in the United States with their hybrid warfare. They affect you already in your mind with fake news, disinformation, etc. They're already here. So let's fight them together once and for all.
Finnish chairman who defeated Russia already.
Well, now we are together with Sweden constructing this northern flank of NATO to prosecute and defense that region. And hopefully the success, yeah. But I would like to go a bit back to history. Finland has been active in peace mediation efforts. The late President Matti Ahtisaari was involved in many of those, and also Nobel laureate also in Indonesian ashes. Indonesia, Aceh in Namibia, in former Yugoslavia, the Balkans, and in Northern Ireland. So in many cases, I haven't noticed that President Trump would be envious of President Ahtisaari for the Nobel Prize, but anyhow, also in this situation, I think it is important to find out ways how to mediate peace in this aggression war over Russia. But we can see that the current negotiations are not going into the right direction. And there are a few problems, like we need the United States and President Trump to push and pressure Russia to real negotiations. As Björn also mentioned that it's the only force which could make Russia to come back to real history. But then this structure of these negotiations has been very odd or peculiar. And we can't see in some parts of the negotiations what is Trump negotiating with Putin by phone or Alaska. And we have been told that there are also issues of bilateral US-Russian issues involved. And Ukraine or European countries are not in the tables where this kind of issues are negotiated. But then it comes also to the fact that also in these issues where Ukraine is negotiating with the US, so European leaders are not involved. To have real kind of balanced peace negotiations, I think there should be US, Russia, Ukraine, and European leaders involved, and kind of a peace conference where we put things together to a way to reach a just and durable, lasting peace. But now it is not happening, but we are trying to find ways how the European leaders, because we have at E3, the greater European nations, the leaders trying to have a seat in these important tables. Then we have some also our President Alexander Stubb, and the Norwegian Prime Minister is having a positive role in trying to find ways how to go to that goal. Then we have also kind of a new mediators, Qatar and United Arab Emirates in some issues. And there has been negotiations in different locations of the globe. And some of them have had some positive steps also. But somebody should now put all these things together and then also give the red lines from Ukraine's and Europe's side what is not approvable in those last phases of negotiations. And there are especially this problem that how to guarantee the security of Ukraine, as was also already touched upon, that we need quite strong backing by United States to be reliable for the next phases of development. And then also this issue of territories. I'm sure that Ukraine can't accept any de jure changes in the geography, so that in the treaty, if we could reach the ceasefire, so that anyhow we can't de jure legally approve these occupations of Russia, so that in the future we should have possibilities to give back full sovereignty for Ukraine for its territories. And then if this de facto changes in territory should happen, then it also should be governed as occupied part of Ukraine. So internationally that it wouldn't be under Russian autocracy. Although, so we have very difficult issues open, though it has been said that there are only one or two open questions in this negotiations. They are very difficult and also severe for the Ukrainian point and European point of view. What is just and durable in this case. Thank you.
So we have just a few questions that Daria and I will pose to you, and then we'll open the floor to questions. For those joining us online, now is a good time to pose your question using the Q&A function of Zoom. So we'll go ahead and begin with Daria. Yes, thank you so much for the remarks. And sorry, everyone speak up please, because the microphone remarks and it really involves the personal stories that reminded us that the real global and lives at stake that we are talking about, but also mentioned with the Russian economy and Russian negotiations. I'll just open with the question, following Zelensky's, President Zelensky's speech, that what happened is for more support from Europe and that Europe perhaps could be doing even more than it's doing already. And I know that some of the countries, including the countries here represented, have been pulling off their weight for the support of Ukraine. And perhaps from your perspective, also working internally within Europe, how do you envision even more support from the European side if there was? How would you like, or how would you respond to Zelensky's?
I could maybe say just one sentence on defense. I think that's where we have to learn from them and together with them to create European defense. Because to make it very blunt, only Nordics, Baltics, Poles and Germans are doing it today. The rest, Brits, French, Italian, Spanish, they still live in this romantic period of, I don't know, Huntington maybe, but history ended, but it's not. So British Army today is more than 10 times smaller than Finnish. Is it really great, the Britain? Okay, but still, you know, we in Lithuania will soon have bigger reserve than in Britain. It's strange. And then it's not only national, I think we have to move to the most inspiring project of the future, create common defense policy. Because today my Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, Defense Commissioner, he's just borrowing money for defense. Well, 150 billion, it's not so small, but it's just the beginning. There is no policy. Institutions. You know, we have 17 or 15 or 16 types of tanks in Europe. We have industries who do not match. Ukrainians are using artillery that you know, it's kind of, they're very inventive, of course, but it's stupid. Americans have one type of tanks. So, but of course, this is for Germany and Swedes and Spanish and Italians and French to agree on those standards. But okay, we can do it because we are 20 times richer than the Russians, and they're still making us, you know, occupying us. This is stupid. So defense, where we have to do a homework together with Ukrainians and having Ukrainian experience on the front lines, actually, well, we might be even stronger than Americans. I'm hoping. I'm right.
Well, I do hope you are right, and well, again, here we have the representatives of those nations who do incredibly a lot of things, both militarily, defense-wise, security-wise, to help Ukraine, not only politically and financially as well, and so on. But definitely, it's not exclusively about what we are up against for Ukraine. Where additional effort is needed. And I would say two things. That I think that all this negotiation buzz that we have been living through whole 2025 is very much misleading. Because it has created the impression that peace is somewhere around the corner. And once you look in the, you know, very painful data, it has 2025, it has been the year when we lost biggest number of civilians across Ukraine to Russian attacks. So this is exactly the negotiating tactics of the Russian Federation, to drag the time, to ensure that they are undermining the unity of the European partners among themselves, the unity, transatlantic unity between the United States. And in the meantime, making sure that they are not taking the decisions that could be painful for Russia. For example, decision on the Russian sovereign assets being used as the the way how to pay for Ukrainian needs right now, even though I think it's incredible that the EU has found this solution in terms of how to borrow against them, basically this 90 billion for 2026, 2027, and making sure that finally there is a decision that the sovereign assets of Russian Federation are staying immobilized until Russia actually starts paying back to Ukraine. But that is also something that has been achieved by Russia. There was not such a sharp decision as it should have been done. So, and many nations, unfortunately, still do have this. We do think that maybe we can sit out and wait out this period of time, and somehow it will fade away. It won't. And so there is this call. But I think really many nations could do more. But when we are asking them to do more, we also have to remember that Russia is not secret. Russia is using the far right, far left in their countries to undermine the credibility of the actions of current governments, question them and so on, and all of that is making things hard. But at the same time, Russia is also spreading another narrative that it is strong, that it is winning. And somehow I think in this country, it lands and it's being accepted by the by politicians that maybe Russia is winning. Russia is not winning. Yes, with this huge, attempt to destroy the country of Ukraine, but over these 4 years, they have gained 2% of the Ukrainian territory. Huge losses. And I think that is also something that all the European nations have to also accept and understand that all together we can ensure, as Björn has said, that Russia is experiencing this strategic defeat, and we should not be afraid of that. Because all these negotiations where we're talking today, there is no talk how Russia is going to be punished. And I think that if Russia is not punished for what they have done, that is just an invitation for Russia to attack again and again. So what can be done? It's not only about military defense, about the support and so on, but also in terms of understanding and in terms of policy and in terms of clear-cut goals. Because we've been criticized, and I'll stop here. We've been criticizing from the very beginning, with all the gratitude for the assistance that we have been getting, the American administration when there's this slogan, "We will be with Ukraine as long as it takes." And I always was asking my counterparts, as long as it takes what? As long as it takes for Russia to be defeated, okay, fine. Or is it as long as it takes for the last Ukrainian to stand? So I'm sorry for being so radically, it's maybe a bit provocative, but that's exactly, we have to define the goal. It's not giving to Ukraine as much, just that much that Ukraine would not fall, but Russia would not win or whatever. It's having the vision, what do we want to achieve? Besides, Ukraine preserving itself as a sovereign, independent, democratic and European state, we also have to ensure that this evil is not spreading further. But that goal somehow is not being defined right now on the global level.
Can I just add one point, I think from our talks in DC, we were of course quite worried. You could imagine Greenland hanging above us, we are coming to DC to met with senators and met with advisors to JD Vance, and Davos speeches, flying over, and stuff like that. But I think one thing that should be said: time for half measures and all this playing around is over. I don't know how the world will look in 10 or 15 years, but it definitely will look different than now. And another speech which everybody agreed, like I said, oh, such a great guy, such a good speech, Mark Carney. Speech is really good, but it would be better if it was not given after here at Tilts Foundation. You go and tell your industries to China, and then you come to us and say, all the middle powers should work together. What? And you know, Ukraine looks far for you. You know, if we don't help them to win strategically, and even if maybe even if they do win strategically, I think in 4 or 5 years you are fighting for Taiwan in China. Or if you don't fight for Taiwan, I'm sorry, the Chinese will have all the chips in the world. I don't know how the students will get their debt back to university and banks, because you will be blown to smithereens by China. Like China now threatened, you know? Yeah, if you want to talk about us, we take all the million minerals, basically, you know, the best what the US could make is washing machine. And if you have, so you will be in war in 4 or 5 years if we still play these half measures and these cases.
Okay, I'm gonna pose just one more question, so we have time to hear from the audience, and I guess this question concerns what a lasting peace would look like for Ukraine. You've laid out various parts, but it seems very complex. So there's a question of internal European common defense of Ukraine. There's a question of the status of the territories that are currently occupied by Russia, and then you will just raise the question as well of punishing Russia, tribunals, things like this. Are there additional pieces that you would put to the puzzle, or how do these pieces also fit together? What is, I guess, the path forward that you see from this point?
Russia understands only one language, it's the language of strength. It's the language of pressure and power. So if you do use the language of pressure, of power, of coercion to peace, but not the victim, but the aggressor, then we can actually see the way to sustainable, lasting, and long peace. But that requires also some additional leadership and maybe courage as well, because Russia should not have a, you know, with all the question marks, with, you know, that whole issue of Greenland has brought to the table of internal debate in NATO. I still do hope that NATO will come out of the stress, the stronger one, finding the solutions and so on. So I do believe that all the nations have to say, well, Russia does not have a veto over the decision on Ukraine's NATO membership. I just wonder why, I don't know, it's, you know, big European, small European powers, different European powers would accept that their sovereign decisions are being decided in Moscow. Why? It's up to us to decide this. And but that would be a real guarantee. Otherwise, yes, we are engaged in a whole bunch of very difficult operational discussions. But it seems that if one single piece of that huge, for me, it looks like a right now the whole discussion with all the good intentions about this security guarantees, like backed by the US, you know, provided by the coalition of the whaling and so on, that it seems that if one piece of the puzzle gets out of this, the whole construction will crumble. So I think we have to look for much more clear mechanisms, instruments. How do we provide for that? That's one thing. Secondly, I do believe that if Russia is not punished, then we cannot expect any lasting peace. Just cannot. Thirdly, I have quite a lot of friends from the non-governmental community in Ukraine that are going around and with another big slogan, make Russia small again. And I do believe that we should not be afraid. If Russia crumbles under this strategic defeat and is part of being divided into pieces, there will be the way, as it was the way after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, how to manage Russian nuclear capacity. I mean, and who will hold, you know, the button. But I think we should not be afraid, because if Russia will continuously hold this big space, then it means that Russia will only see the only way how to carry on is by fighting this conquering force. So having this in mind, we can go to a path to peace. And again, and the last thing, if we do let even one village of Ukraine being de jure recognized as Russian after the end of this war by any reasonable power, even, that means that we are inviting Russia for another attack. We want to do that, if we are ready to fight the wars across the globe, then let's do it.
And just to support, not maybe ironically, but still, or Russian Empire was defeated in Finland. Then Finland was
What episode do you refer? Defeated as in Winter War?
Russia,
It was a defeat.
Finland was part of Russian Empire. So now they are not. Now they're the happiest people on the planet statistically. Russia was occupying Baltic states. Do we look unhappy? We are very happy, so it's a good thing.
To be deoccupied.
Yes.
Because it's, you sounded like Russia was occupying and building
Yeah.
back.
Very quick follow-up question. Peace and vision for Ukraine look from Ukraine and from Europe, say. You heard about it. Do you feel there's consensus?
It depends from which part of Europe do you look at. And let's be clear, I mean, let's be honest. There's still no, sorry. There isn't still no clear common denominator, and if it is unfortunately is too low. So we have to ensure that this common denominator is kind of heightened, I think.
But never ever Europe was more united on Ukraine than today. Never ever. But it took a high cost. Went to invasion. Today, mostly Washington is the most divided on Ukraine. Germans, we were together in Washington with the grandson of Chancellor Kohl. Grandson of Chancellor, the youngest generation, and he was great. Germans today in Lithuania are building first big military base after Second World War. And you know what we say to those Germans who retreat? We say, thank you. Thank you so much that you finally came to build that peace. Do not be afraid of building peace and investing. So they made the most courageous decision last year to take this budget ceiling for defense. They can do it. They did it. And to make it very blunt, before Ukrainian invasion, Berlin was also the biggest problem. Like today is Washington. When Trump is attacking Merkel, and he'll like to attack Merkel, today he looks like that. Not allowing Ukraine to have a chance to be a NATO member, making the same Merkel type of mistake that she with Sarkozy did in 2008. I was there. I was deputy foreign minister there. I think that was a huge mistake. But we learn from our mistakes in Europe. That's why I love Europe. Actually, we maybe only move together when we do mistakes and then correct them. That's okay to correct. It's time to correct those mistakes in DC.
Maybe a couple of positive signs of the European unity. We could make a deal that Ukraine is financed for the next 2 years. And it is shared proportionally according to the weight of the different EU countries. So it's most solidary solution that is volunteer contribution has been in place until now. Secondly, as Zigis mentioned, this support for Ukraine is quite unanimous. There are these exceptions like Hungary, but I think the next elections there will be positive in that sense. And then we are together ramping up the defense industries and all the security policies inside European Union. In a few years, we will have doubled or tripled our capacity in defense industries and Ukrainian defense industries vital part of that, a major part of that also. So together with the Ukrainian European industries, we are capable of answering to the challenges of Russia. Then an important part of this future is also that which are the ways how we could support reform of Russia, so that this autocracy, Putin's power could come to an end. This oligarchic system is kind of a part of the British autocracy, and it's very difficult to raise movements amongst the population, but it has to be done so that there will be change. We can't think that there would be 30, 40 years this kind of autocratic, aggressive power to the east of Europe.
May I just add one final thing, I think along the way, the biggest problem will happen on the European side. Europe has two problems. European Union has two problems. Whenever we can do amazing things, vaccines, we can raise money for war, we can do it. We have to be fishers and farmers. Why Iceland is not EU? Fish. Norway, fish. Why Greenland is not EU territory? Fish. No. And then Mercosur, farmers. So Ukrainians that has to know the biggest potential in farming in the world, maybe, if we will in EU. And that will be a bunker European.
All right, it's time to open the floor to questions. If you could please identify yourself when you ask the question, speak loudly so the camera behind you can pick up your voice. I appreciate it. I see Vita and Costa. So
Hal, thank you so much for being here today and for us for organizing this. My name is Vita Raskevchuk. I'm a PhD student in history here. And my question will also be in reference to Mark Hardy's speech that Mr. Varana was already referenced. And I think despite of its clear dichotomies, it realized one very important thing, that international law is an illusion. If you are not a hegemonic superpower who can sometimes avoid or deflect certain rules. And my question to this very fantastic panel that is represented by countries that Mr. Hardy called mid-range powers, what can we do to make international law less of a fiction and more of a reality? And especially in the context where I see many times where Europeans ourselves, we love applying international law very selectively. So how can we make an argument for international law for Ukraine or for Greenland, but disregard it for other places, Palestine, or you name it? And maybe how do we foster these solidarities between countries that already for a long time knew that international law was not applicable to everyone, and how we can actually strengthen this framework rather than just bravely verbalize that it's not really working.
I can maybe start replying. We already did it with European Union. European Union is the last safe haven of this rule of law that is really working. But I was also ambassador at large for democracy. We had a strange organization like democracy, community of democracies. I was also ambassador in DC, and I remember Robert Palmer. He was the speechwriter of Reagan of the Westminster speech. Passed away already, but it was my last meeting with him, and he said something that inspired me till today. He said, "Gingiz, please fight till the end of your life to get rid of United Nations and make it United Nations of democracy." I think that's the problem with international law. United Nations were created by victorious powers, including Stalin, that annihilated us. They were not just. If you would look the United Nations Charter, there is no one little word, democracy. One little D that is non-existent. If we would fix it in order, it would ban autocracies as by international law. That might be my dream. I think that's the only chance. Humans are built equal. no criminals, no thieves, no Putins can have any power to take those powers from any person, and they do. And those guys, they cooperate together. This axis of evil, oh, it kills, it cooperates on such a level that you cannot imagine. Even this axis of evil before Second World War was just kids' axis to compare with Chinese, Russian, and all other axes. It's on, you know, they have many agreements, they have technologies today to do it. They are in your phone with TikTok algorithms that who win the elections today. And that's done on purpose. So we have to fight to find international organizations that fight for freedom and democracy. In the EU we found, but that's a regional little club. But that's why everyone wants to join, because that's the only club that makes it.
Maybe a few concrete steps, of course, the United Nations reform is utmost important. They usually to reduce the powers of the permanent members of the Security Council, so the veto would be softer. And then the geographical composition of Security Council should be balanced, and more generally, the General Assembly and the Secretary General would have wider powers to involve in crisis situations in the world. So those are maybe reachable changes in a few years. We should use this Nuremberg moment after this war is ended, so have real changes in the international law. There are also this kind of development like around the theme of responsibility to protect, so that the international community should have rights to go into nation states when they are killing people in their minorities or otherwise inside countries. So that kind of a more just international legal system is needed. Then we have this impunity problem. Important with this Ukraine case is that all of these Russian assets will be used to compensate Ukraine for the damages that Russia has caused. So it will be a very important moment of developing international law that this will happen.
Johannes was a justice minister for 8 years.
6 years.
We'll take questions from Konstantin and Emily next as a group.
Again, name is Konstantin Sonin. I'm a professor at the Paris School of Public Policy. First, thank you for coming here, and thank you for your advocacy for Ukraine, for Lithuanians, especially thank you for supporting not only Ukrainians but Russian exiles. I mean, Lithuanians have nothing to be thankful to Russia that occupied them, but since the beginning of the war, Lithuania is like stellar in supporting Russian immigrants, artists, everyone. I mean, thank you. Anyways, my question will be about the wake-up call, because I think every one of you, except for Ivana, said that the Europe heard, your countries heard the wake-up call. But actually, based on your other comments, I wonder whether it is so, because like you still address to America as if there is something to expect more than the United States are already doing. Of course, President Trump is sort of an outlier. The American public is more supportive of supporting Ukraine, but it's not supportive of providing more support than was provided on the Biden administration. If you look at all potential Democratic candidates, if you look at what President Obama, who is the most popular Democrat in the country, says, they are not that supportive of Ukraine. Suddenly, nobody wants to send troops there. And I'm not sure that they are saying anything. They are actually not criticizing President Trump on Ukraine issue. The critics come from the right-wing circles, not from the potential opposition. So you could say that there is an American consensus that there will be no American larger involvement in Ukraine. So I wonder, like, in my specific question, in your country is, what is the feeling about sending troops before the end of hostilities?
Well, I think you're not right, because as we know from the history, Americans always do the right thing after they use all other opportunities. It takes time to wake up this beautiful big country. And usually for this time, we pay with our bodies and territories. I think we will do it because I know it from my own example. Americans, they were afraid of our freedom, and most importantly, afraid of our NATO membership. We did it in 12 years. We lobbied hard, we convinced, we were going to universities like this, the streets, and I think we have to do it for Ukraine. And on Russia, I will make my last statement. I think this is still a Russian problem, because Americans may still make a big mistake by supporting Russian imperialism. Only few presidents in America were like Reagan, who were openly saying that we do not support Russian imperialism. Be it Clinton, who supported Chechens killed by Russians, be it many other presidents who were just blinding the eyes on what Russians were doing to all the neighbors, all nationalities inside for 500 years. And concerning those Russians who live in Vilnius, I make a clear distinction. Not every Russian Democrat is Democrat, because a Russian Democrat supports Russian Empire, he is not Democrat. He's the same Russian imperialistic person, because he will take power and he will continue killing all other people who are simply different by nationality, by religion. We all had our own little empires, by the way, in Europe, but we learned how to build the world in a civilized way. Russia is still building it in, I don't know, maybe 16th or 17th century way.
Great. I'll go to Emily, and then right after Emily asks a question, I'm going to ask some questions from online.
Thank you everyone. I'm Emily Moffett. I'm the city partner at the Czech and Ukrainian history. I'm proud Czech. And I guess my question is related to how we relay this type of information in the United States, because I am South American, and when I try to explain to the people in this country why Ukraine is important, why these talks are important, I see a lot of sort of lack of context and weaponization of history in a way that is not productive. And then on the other hand, I see people very, very fixated on semantics. So I heard someone on the panel say that Ukrainians have the best economy, and I was wondering what was meant by that, because best is a word, choice of words, right? And unfortunately, we live in a time in which people are harping on one word or one piece of information, and I was wondering if that could be explained.
Okay, I will explain what I wanted to say. It's old Jewish saying, because in Lithuania we had many Jews, Litvaks, who created the idea of Jewish state. And we have that saying that I think is a saying of all frontline nations. When you live on existential extinction kind of level, when you confront concentration camps that are like, from my capital, Lukashenko, is just 30 kilometers. We know what's happening there. You cannot be average. In my mentality, I always want to be the best. And look to the development of the Lithuanian economy. Okay, compete with Venezuelan economy if you want. With Venezuela 30 years ago, we were like equal brothers, like that. And then socialists took the Venezuela, and that happened. We are there, Venezuela is there. Italy, look to Italy 30 years ago and us. I was studying in Italy, I was like you 30 years ago. Italians, they were so rich. Today, in the region I was studying, I'm much richer than them because my economy, because I'm hunting for innovations, because I'm afraid to die. I know if I will not do reforms, if I am not hunting for the best technologies, I die. French, they die when they do reforms. They go to the streets when they start reform the country. And that's why I know that I will be better. Israelis are the same, South Koreans are the same, Finns are the same. And that's what I meant that they, when you confront the devil every day, and that's I was ambassador there, and that's why I brought a lot of American businesses to Lithuania. Americans are now biggest job creators in Lithuania from direct foreign investments. They said, you know what's the best qualities of you? You are very strong people. Just your qualities. If I bring business from London, most of the business American brought to Lithuania from London. If I plant it in Lithuania, my company is getting 4 times better money because we work like hell, like Americans maybe. So this is the front line of that, and they are Ukrainians like are 10 times stronger than us. Look what they do with this big Russian empire. And this empire is doing the war for 4 years. During Second World War, they reached Berlin already.
Yeah, it's exactly the number of the day just recently. There was this, we went over the number of days that something which was called in the Soviet Union the Great Patriotic War, because we didn't count the second war in the history that was taught in the Soviet Union. We were not counting it from the 1st of September of 1939, because nobody was telling that part of the story that Soviet Union also invaded Poland. It wasn't just Hitler who did. But if you count it from June of 1941, when this Great Patriotic War has started, and the end of it in 1945, as Soviets were counting, but May, then we already are over that period of time. So, when I'm also, you're saying that it's difficult and to explain definitely. But if you're just, I'm surprised quite many times that people are just getting used that there is a war ongoing somewhere. That it's just, oh, those brave Ukrainians, they're standing. Oh, but what is it? 0 Fahrenheit here today? I don't know, because I counted in Celsius. Yeah, like that, as Ruslanas has been saying. It's like that for a couple of weeks, and then like on my way here, well, right now it's a bit warmer, but plus a couple of degrees. But like my husband is calling me and saying, well, you know what, we didn't have the electricity for 22 hours at home in a row. 22 hours in a row without electricity. And then like my father, well, he lives in a multiple story building, and they thankfully have heat, but they don't have electricity and water. So you have to go, like, if you live on, I don't know, 15, 16 floor, so you take your water, you go upstairs and then for technical needs and so on. So yes, and these incredible Ukrainians are surviving. Moreover, Russians are not even breaking their will, because we know that what is coming if Russia occupies us is much worse than what we are even experiencing right now. We are being destroyed, because nobody talks about what is happening on the occupied territories. Every single village that was deoccupied had a mass grave in it, had torture chambers, had cases of rape, had cases of deportation of children, militarization of children, wiping off everything Ukrainian and so on. Somehow it's like when we're talking about these territories being given to one or another country, either Ukraine or Russia, we assume that it's either Finland or Sweden that those Ukrainians will live in. That those are normal conditions, that people would live there. And I think that we just have to remind that again and again, because in 2022, I think that emotional narrative, that emotional shock did work. Then I was big proponent, like in Ukraine, for coming to much more rational arguments with our partners, because it was about interest, it was about like common action and so on and so on. But I think right now in 2026, we have to go back to emotional argument, because somehow people just got fine with the very fact that we continuously die there, that we continuously stand up to the bully, and now we are even being pressured to be nice to the bully. We cannot accept that. And then just one sentence towards what you were saying with regard to the international law, I totally agree that UN needs reform. But I also think that if we have enough countries that would not accept the distortions to get of that international law, and that would not yield to pressure, that would mean that there is this fabric of this international law that is still holding. So right now, yes, we can accept that the way we know it, it doesn't exist anymore. But it does mean that there are quite a few of us who can ensure that the brick or the fundament of the basis of that law is preserved, and that we can carry this on in some other form ahead of us. But that means that we have to preserve what we believe in, and don't give up on what we believe in. That's what we Ukrainians are doing. That's what we Ukrainians will be doing. And one more sentence, I have to say this. It's not Putin's war. It is Russian war. Every single Russian, and I underline, every single Russian does have a drop of guilt in this war. And if there are Russians outside of Russia, I would like to see them under the Russian embassies. At least here, they shouldn't be afraid of protesting for the Russian war against Ukraine. But I don't see those demonstrations neither in Berlin or in Prague or in Vienna or anywhere, where they would protest against what Russia is doing in Ukraine. That would take off some of their guilt, but they are not doing it.
Did you have a follow-up, Daria?
I think they were thinking as economy, and the information, I think one of speaking that great that the cost of this resilience and resistance. And my question in terms of economy as well, it's kind of back to something that you said in terms of loans, and thinking of Ukraine having the best economy and future prosperous Ukrainian European future, we would have to pay that debt that Ukraine has now, keeps getting loans from EU. Depopulated country, the citizens may inform me, how is it gonna work, that prosperous economy? How do you see that happening in Ukraine, given so much debt that's now real?
Look, I'm not an economist, but I'm a social democrat. I was hearing and everybody on the left, we were hearing, okay, from basically forever now, that if you increase your wealth tax by 1%, suddenly economy will collapse, business will run away from the country. It's impossible, it's easier, it's easier to send a man to the moon than, to fund the school system, in the United States. It would seem so. And then one day, COVID pandemic happens. And for a year, half of the Ukrainian economy shut down. And nothing happened. And now with Ukraine Ukraine will have all of them. So does the United States. This money, is like it's kind of problem. If the EU has something, it's money. It's the only major thing we have. If the EU has something, it's money. And money is not a problem. The problem is, these things we are talking about, because even here, there's a little bit. It's good for a change, but we are a little bit speaking as if, what Juan said, as if the war will soon end and we will start, rebuilding and blah blah blah, and it sort of demobilizes is especially our southern partners, Russians right now send the millions of dollars, if maybe tomorrow, they will somewhere, they will send something. So, that's the money I don't think we forget about.
All right, we have, I'm sorry, just 2 minutes left, so please ask your question very briefly, and before you answer, I'm gonna bundle with the last question we have on Zoom as well.
Sure, I'll try to be quick. My name is Nikita. I'm second year economics and political science major here. I'm from Ukraine, from Kiev, and I was recently visiting the magnificent city of Kiev, and it was really insightful for me because it was my first time in Kiev in many years, and I actually had to go to a conscription center to renew my documents, and that left me a really strong bitter feeling of visiting these sorts of places because I remember last year we were welcoming here at the University of Chicago, Mr. Slaza. At that point, he was representative of the UN here, of Ukraine in the UN. And he was telling about the queues of like Ukrainians willing to join the voluntary service in Ukraine. And I feel like right now the topic of mobilization is like one of the most acute problems happening in the Ukrainian society. It's often overlooked for multiple reasons, for fair and unfair reasons. But I would probably say it's one of the most essential like problems happening right now in Ukraine. And my question is to like you as a fellow representative at the Ukraine Parliament, like what are specific things happening within like Verkhovna Rada, within the Ukrainian Parliament to prevent all sorts of problems happening with the topic of mobilization, right?
And then we have 2 questions that I will summarize very briefly in this way. What is the best thing that either Mr. Trump or America could do in the next few days or weeks or years to bring about an end to the war? In other words, what should we Americans do to support? So we'll take a final round of anyone who wants to say their word.
Well, maybe you go ahead with the easy answer, then I'll, oh no, that will be a full stop.
Full stop, okay.
Yeah,
I will make it.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh, I'll respond very quickly with regard to mobilization. Okay, probably at this point you have to know I do represent the opposition. We have our own vision of that's internal issue, right? So we do have quite a lot of concrete suggestions how to not only use the kind of the responsibility part and the pressure part and the necessity part, but also the incentives for those who are being mobilized. One of the things that we have been advocating for, and we've been filing our amendments, our draft proposals and so on, is to have a certain limit to the time that you serve in the armed forces during the wartime. Because that would provide people with with the possibility of getting out, not killed or not wounded, that they would, right? Other possibility of getting out from the armed forces. So far, we have not been successful in having that decision. Even though the Parliament of Ukraine has passed that the decision that the government is obliged, like within a certain period of time, to file the proposal how they see it. And unfortunately, this is our internal argument right now because the government just disregarded the parliamentary decision. So this will be ongoing. I totally agree with you, without really addressing those things, we will not fix some of the very important challenge that we have at this point, because yes, this war is extremely technological, but at the same time, without people, it cannot be fought. And so when we also, hearing very well what Chancellor Merz is also saying with regards to the number of our men that are outside of the country that are mobilization age, and that would probably be somehow more worked on to be incentivized to come back home and to help us stand our ground as we do until now.
and an easy question, Trump might defeat Russia in Ukraine. He can. And that will solve 70% of American problems on the globe. Because Russians are everywhere, in Cuba, in Venezuela, in China, in Iran, everywhere. They are in Washington DC. They are everywhere because they occupy countries but they're incapable to occupy countries by arms. Georgia showed it, Ukraine showed it, they occupy you politically. They occupy Georgia politically, they tried in Moldova, but they didn't succeed. They will try in Berlin, in France soon. Every election is a Russian special operation against you. So defeat it now before it's not too late. And it's not about only weapons and money. America has sanctions that really works. Crash the bloodstream of Russia, oil and gas, seriously. And it's a Reagan weapon. That's how Soviet Union exploded. It might be quite effective in half a year. In half a year.
And may I just add something very shortly on what Trump and the administration can do is stop this aggressive behavior against its own allies and friends, which we have had recently. We don't need, division. We need unity. So that's, point that aggressive behavior in right direction where it belongs, not to us, because we are friends of America. We are friends of the United States. What's happening now in our region is that even the most pro-American voices are starting changing their voices and being more anti-American because of this. So we are not helped by such behavior.
Well, maybe I have to add, because Finland is now kind of a pioneer in Europe for the large reserves and rolling conscription system, which is, I think, the only way to have defense strong enough in a smaller nation states. And it's impossible to create that during a war or crisis like Ukraine now has. But if you had to have that kind of system, you would have 2, 3, 4 million trained soldiers to be changed in the front.
I will add, two things, one from before, but Konstantin asked about Russian opposition. What I hope from Russian opposition now is one thing, sooner or later, we will work, and we believe that Russia will collapse in the war. Right.
Actually, Konstantin's question was totally on a different matter.
Yeah.
I just thank Lithuania that they care about Russian opposition despite them being obnoxious fools and whoever. No, really, thank you for having all these people. And there are some people who are totally apolitical and they have helped without I'm not sure that Russia is going to pay Lithuania for this.
No, but I would like to see, we will work tirelessly so Ukraine wins on the war front, and then when we do, it would be super good if opposition would have already prepared some kind of, let's here in the US, decolonized version of, textbooks, of history textbooks, of literature textbooks. Not saying, that Russians are the worst people on earth, but just honest. Like this guy was a great writer, but he was also a medialist. Just honest. This would be super important because of the future. But on the question with Trump, fortunately, I think we don't need a lot. It's not that we need Americans to fly in and blast something, or otherwise it's impossible for them to win. No, sanctions could break it. No, some other things could break it. Russia is not winning, so we don't need costing. Wow.
Plus, tomahawks.
Just push down the hill.
All right, thank you so much for that work.